I'm just going to do some basic cuts first because if I start from scratch we can move up as we go. Yeah, best if I don't tread on it. Okay. Now, there's somebody, I spent some time sharpening a couple of roughing gouges.
Worn out ones.
Yeah, right. No. Rough time in that box there.
The rest.
And there's a conversation we're having to reach out. So I sort of steered the conversation on there. So, you know, like this, and there were tools.
That's what happens when your wheels lock.
There you go.
Tell him I'm picking up everything he says back there.
Frank.
Who's the guy at the end?
Frank.
Frank,
Yeah, well, you're probably far
your
enough.
full firing line.
Now, I'm going to do a roughing cut along here first. Let's assume, because if it was a square piece, we could take all the bits off with this. And you notice it's not true. You hear that knocking noise? That's eccentric at this end. So the first thing to do is to make a spigot at this end that will fit in the chuck. Tidy up the end. Now, that's all it needs, and that'll match into the jaws at this end with minimal slop. So I'm going to turn that around because that'll be a stronger hold than what's in there at the moment.
Peter, with your fence,
Yeah?
with the fence here, how far up your work do you have that set normally? Halfway or?
The distance,
No, the height. The height, the working your tree.
the height.
Yeah.
Okay, about horizontal to the centre of the spindle.
That horizontal.
You can vary that. If you're very tall, you might have it a bit higher. If you're very short, you might have it a bit lower, so that the tool comes in at a comfortable angle for you. And if you're up here like this, that's not good angle. It's not comfortable. It's bad for your back, bad for your shoulder, all that stuff. Now,
Got a nice smell about it, hasn't it?
and it'll get stronger. Now, I want to cut that piece off. I would normally use a bandsaw for that. This will probably just so it doesn't get in the way at the end of the chuck, because I want to have that fairly firmly gripped. Yeah, thanks. Good thinking. Now I think I might have made that a little bit too wide from top to bottom, because it doesn't, it's touching at the bottom rather than coming right to the end of, right into the jaw, snug. But it's not bad. This won't be 100% scented because I'm just testing it by eye, and once I put a blade up to it, no, we'll try the roughing one a little bit first. Yeah, you can see the flutter in that. And the first thing we want to do is rough it down till it's round. This will be the same procedure for any piece of wood that you put in. The exception is when you're doing an eccentric turning, but that's advanced, and we don't need to trouble ourselves about that. One of the general guidelines on a lathe is that you never reach over it for obvious reasons, and it's difficult when you're starting if your tools are all hanging up here. Turn around the side. So
That makes it easier for you.
yeah, that's good. That's excellent. My word, that's strong. Now, how many people haven't turned wood before? Okay, we've got a few hands there. Well, I'm going to start at the very basic. The headstock, where the drive comes through, and the tailstock. And this sort of turning is called spindle turning because it's supported at both ends. And the third element is the tool rest, which travels along the bed. The bed keeps them all together, and the bed needs to be strong. It all needs to be strong so that there is no movement of any part in relation to any other part. If it's loose, or it moves, or it flexes, that flexing is going to give you irregularities in your cutting, and you'll never get a smooth surface, you'll never get a true round, and you'll just disappoint yourself. So that's the first thing. Some of the hazards. The first one is having things fly off at you. We've talked about a face mask, a full face mask, or at the very least, eye protection. And that'll become more essential with bowls than it is with spindles, because the bowls are only supported on one side. It's very hard for something to get out and away. It does happen, but not very often. The next hazard is dust. And you really need, you know, when I started at the men's shed, they didn't have any dust control, and I did two things. I used wet wood, green wood, because green wood doesn't make dust, and it comes off in nice peels, and it's easy to turn, and it's gentle. Dry wood breaks up into little fragments, and the fine dust, the most dangerous dust, is the stuff you can't see at all. And so if you're going to turn something that's dry, you either need a dust extractor or a mask or both, or be outside where there might hopefully be a breeze. The dilution rate in open air is pretty good anyway, so you're less likely to have problems that way. But don't just do it in an enclosed space, and like they used to do, they say they eat the dust, because you can ruin your lungs and you won't know until it's too late. The next one is knowing where the switch is, and it's very good to not only know where the switch is, but when you switch it on, you keep your finger there so that if something's wrong, you know where the off switch is and you can turn it off straight away. And then not until you're satisfied that it's going okay do you take your finger away from there. So I mean, this sort of lathe with the slow speeds, I could say a better rule is to start slow every time, like that. And when you're satisfied that it's running okay at a slow speed, you can wind it up. But with your lathes here, no, some of these have variable speed on a lever, and you can do the same. Some of those are difficult to deal with in that way because you can't change the speed back down unless it's going. Have you found that?
This one's the same.
Yeah. So you need to always remember to turn it down before you finish. So while it's still going, or you can turn it on without anything in it at all and turn it down and then mount your timber in it and then turn it on when it's at a nice slow speed and slowly bring it up to where it suits you. Other hazards. It pays with most woodworking tools to mime before you actually turn the switch on. So if I know that I'm going to be using this tool like that, I check where my feet are. There's a bit of cable in the way there. I make sure that if I move my feet I'm not going to trip on anything, and I'm going to move from side to side like that, and there's space to do that without bumping into anything. And your retirees, your volunteers, there's no boss looking over your shoulder. Your time is your own. Never rush. Never be rushed. And that is the most important safety factor going your way. Because when you're working for a living, your boss can be concerned about how fast you work because it's his money. And he won't hesitate to let you know about his concerns, and there's always a bit of pressure on you to do it faster. And in that process, you can overlook something that might be important. You don't have to do that. Don't. Take your time. Do it slowly, even if it takes you twice as long. Nobody cares. It doesn't matter. So, and I keep telling the guys at my own guild, that's weapon number one in safety. There's a lot of other things that people are concerned about, but I've gone through the most important ones. Now I'm going to turn this on, and you can see that's a rough surface there, and that's what you get with a roughing gouge. And I'm going to, has everyone seen that closely? Do you want to come and feel it? Come put a hand on it. No. Okay? Yep. Now that's...
Corrugated.
And I'm going to change now to a skew chisel. People worry about skew chisels because they catch, and you can get a little bit of a fright sometimes, but it worthwhile persevering and becoming expert in their use, because it's a tool you use for everything. This is the first cut you will need to learn, and it's a planing cut. You can do it either way. Do we have any left-handers here? Who? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Well, you can do it left-handed too, like that. And if you're like me, I can do it both ways because I'm ambidextrous. All that means is that as a kid, I was left-handed and I was forced to write right-handed. And that happened to a lot of people. And if you don't find you can change hands like that, you can always do this. That's using your hands and arms the same. And changing direction of the cut. So, it's a pretty rough old piece of wood, isn't it? I haven't exactly got that smooth. Let's try again. Just turn the speed up a bit because that might improve the surface. Now, this is a planing cut, and you can feel the difference. And you can also see where I haven't cut yet. And if you're cutting into the wood, you get all sorts of jags jumping up and down out of it.
That's a lot smoother, isn't it? The higher speed made your sawdust, well, your
Finer.
shavings finer,
Yes, it did.
and therefore it does a finer
That's right.
cut.
Yep. So it's a fairly dry and brittle piece of wood, so it's not going to behave real well for me. That just fell off the end of the tool rest. That's feeling better. Yeah. Now, as I said, that's a planing cut, and it's important to know how you hold the chisel to do it. I didn't describe that initially, but one, you'll need to all come closer to this.
Looking at the way you have it angled.
Yeah. Now, the first thing is that you've got to hold your hand very firmly on the rest. The heel of your hand stays on the tool rest all the time. You can hold the chisel with your fingers wrapped around it, and you can turn it and you can raise it up and down with this hand back here. And you can slide your hand along there, and you can flex your fingers to move it on there, provided you keep pressing it firmly against the rest the whole time. The edge of the blade is at 45 degrees to the central line. It's at 45 degrees also to the direction of travel of the wood. The wood's coming around like that, and it'll take a gentle peel and gradually take more as you go. The next thing is that to make that sort of planing cut with those things all right, you hold the chisel high and draw it slowly toward, rest it on the wood so that it's not cutting at all. At that stage, it's rubbing on the bevel, on this part of the bevel here and there. And while it's rubbing on the bevel, you move the handle and the blade slowly backwards until it just starts to cut. And you'll see a tiny little peel or a bit of dust coming up just in that area of the blade there. And you keep the cutting action in that area between halfway to 2/3 of the way down. You're not engaging all of the wood and the whole of the blade, because the blade's slightly curved one way and the wood is round, so it's curved the other way, and it's only where those two curves meet that you're cutting. That's a nice small area, and if the wood's a bit rough, you're going to absorb the shock of that without having it jump around. So I was there, and we've got the chisel at the right angle and the hand in the right place, and we're coming down to the point where the blade starts to take a tiny shave. Can you see that? It's very tiny, but that's all you want to take. Once you've learned to do tiny cuts like that, you can move to doing bigger ones. Now, you avoid getting the bottom, the short tip, into the wood, because when you do, the blade will start to move deeper into the wood, and you don't want that. And you avoid getting this end into the wood, because that's when it catches and goes bang, and it'll throw the blade backwards so fast you won't have time to respond, and your hands will be over here somewhere before you realise and react. It feels a little scary. It's not going to injure you at all. It's just a catch. But that's the way it happens. And if I turn this right down, I can demonstrate it.
What's the name of that blade?
A skew chisel.
Skew chisel.
So here we are, nice and slow, and we're still getting our tiny shave with it on the bevel, and when this comes down, that's what happens.
Catches right on that top corner.
Yeah, and that digs in, and if you're doing a finishing cut, you've suddenly got a nasty chunk out of it, and you've got to work out what to do with it to get it back to a nice turning.